In October 1536, outside the city of Brussels, a man named William Tyndale was led to a wooden stake. He had been imprisoned for over a year, betrayed by an associate, tried for heresy. His crime was translation. Tyndale had spent years producing something the Church did not authorize, an English rendering of Scripture, words written not in Latin, but in the language ordinary people actually spoke. He worked in exile, moving between cities in the Low Countries. Pages were smuggled into England, concealed in bales of cloth. When authorities discovered copies, they were burned publicly. When they finally found Tyndale, he was condemned. He was strangled first, then burned. According to witnesses, his final words were a prayer. "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." Why would an institution execute a man for translating its own sacred text? For most of religious history, belief was widespread. Literacy was not. The vast majority of believers never read their own sacred texts, not because they lacked devotion, but because reading itself was rare. In medieval Europe, literacy hovered well below 10%. In many regions, far lower. Scripture existed primarily as sound, heard in churches, chanted in monasteries, sung in cathedrals, but not as something believers accessed directly. This was not initially a problem. Early religious communities spread through oral teaching, shared meals, personal instruction. Shared belief did not require uniform interpretation. The problem emerged when religion scaled. Small communities can tolerate disagreement. Local traditions diverge. Authority remains personal. Institutions cannot. Once a religion extended across regions and populations, interpretation became destabilizing. Different interpretations produce different authorities, and institutions cannot survive competing centers of authority. The central question was never whether people should believe. It was who would determine what belief meant. One of the earliest mechanisms of control was linguistic. Sacred texts were written, preserved, and transmitted in languages most believers did not speak: Hebrew and Aramaic, Greek, Latin, Classical Arabic, Sanskrit. This was not always intentional at first, but it became structural because translation is not neutral. Translation requires choice. Choice produces interpretation, and interpretation produces authority. By the 4th century, Jerome's Latin Vulgate became the authorized scripture of Western Christianity. Over time, Latin ceased to be a living language. It remained in monasteries, universities, and liturgy, but disappeared from daily life. A French peasant heard scripture in Latin. A German merchant heard Mass in Latin. An English noblewoman confessed in Latin. Understanding was not expected. Mediation was. Sacred language elevated the text and preserved institutional control over meaning. When vernacular translations appeared, they disrupted that structure, not because they were inaccurate, but because they were accessible. In 1409, church authorities in England prohibited translation of scripture into English without episcopal approval. Reading unauthorized translations was itself an offense. The issue was not error, it was access. Language alone did not regulate interpretation. Even among the educated, interpretation had to be constrained. Institutions responded by formalizing authorization. Clerical schools, monastic orders, universities. Interpretation became a credentialed activity. To explain scripture legitimately, one had to be trained within approved institutions, recognized by established hierarchy, sanctioned through ordination or appointment. Interpretation without authorization was not considered theology. It was intrusion. Charismatic interpreters were especially dangerous, not because they lacked sincerity, but because they created loyalty outside institutional channels. Across traditions, similar structures emerged. Rabbinic authority developed through recognized chains of transmission. Islamic jurisprudence required mastery of established methodology. Hindu priesthood restricted access to Vedic knowledge through caste and ritual status. The details varied. The structure did not. Interpretation without permission was not merely incorrect. It was illegitimate. Alternative interpretations never disappeared. They were categorized. Some remained local and tolerated. Others were corrected. Some were declared heretical. The distinction was not sincerity. It was alignment. Interpretations that reinforced institutional authority could be absorbed. Those that created parallel authority structures could not. The Cathars of southern France developed a theological system independent of Rome. They were eliminated through crusade. Jan Hus challenged ecclesiastical authority and was burned. Possession of vernacular scripture led to imprisonment. Severity followed threat. Not belief, but institutional coherence. For centuries, the system held. Then, reproduction changed. The printing press allowed texts to move faster than institutions could regulate. Martin Luther expected academic debate. Instead, his arguments circulated widely within weeks. When scripture appeared in vernacular languages, interpretation escaped containment. The monopoly did not collapse because of theology. It collapsed because of distribution. Institutions responded by reasserting authority through councils, prohibitions, and censorship. But once access widened, interpretation could no longer be fully governed. As interpretation centralized, texts changed function. They became references rather than open sources. Believers did not ask what a text said. They asked what it was said to mean. This shift occurred gradually. So gradually, it became invisible. The text remained sacred. The interpretation became binding. Translation threatened that arrangement because it removed mediation, and mediation was the system. William Tyndale was executed for translating scripture into English. Within decades, English scripture became authorized. The words did not change. The authority structure did. Sacred texts have never been about content alone. They have always involved control. Who may access them? Who may explain them? Who may decide what they mean? When those questions are answered by institutions, belief becomes governable. When they are opened, belief becomes unstable. Most of history chose governable. The question is not whether that choice was right. It is whether we recognize the structure when we see it.